Thank you very much for being here, and thanks, UNED, for their kind invitation for me to be in this conference today. At first, my plan was to be there face to face with you. Unfortunately, due to some visa processes, I couldn't do it. But I'm really happy to be here and just to share a little bit about what learning strategies and definitely just one approach that we need to take into account when it comes to teaching and learning English. So I will proceed now to share my screen. So as my presenter kindly introduced me, my name is Martin Caicedo. I work for Oxford University Press. Oxford University Press is the editorial department for the University of Oxford in England. Now, also, one thing that I would like to make an introduction for you today is to talk to you about before we get into the learning strategies is one initiative, one solution that is taking the world by a storm, which is exam and a certification. And I would like to briefly talk to you about the Oxford Test of English. And the Oxford Test of English has been built as the first and only test, certification test, proficiency English test that is endorsed and certified by the University of Oxford. And all the pedagogies and all the methodology have behind the building of the test has these learning strategies as its core, because we understand that a test, more than just a test, is a combination of evidence from our students, what they have learned and what they have used as competence in terms of English as foreign or second language. And we're very proud to be partnering with UNED as one of our main test centers in Costa Rica. Our topic today is language learning strategies and our fundamentals and how we can apply these into our classroom. And why this topic? Because definitely we have spent many years, decades thinking about teaching, thinking about how we can make our teaching more efficient. But definitely we need to start thinking on how to implement, how to include, how to embed strategies into our teaching processes, into our pedagogical sequences, into our day by day in the classroom. So for this, I want you to please help me out with something. With your cell phones, or if you can, yeah, with your cell phone, because we are in a forum, please go to this website. You can just go with the QR code and scan it, or go to this really long string of letters. It's easier if you have your cell phone. Try to focus it onto the screen and answer this question. If English is your second language, how do you learn it? What's our background? How do we learn it? So we're seeing that 60% of the participants come from formal training in a non-English speaking country. Yeah, like an institute, school, or university. Formal training in an English speaking country, people who have gone to the States or England or Canada or any English speaking country and took courses there on my own. Good. On my own in a non-English speaking country. Okay, we have 5 voters. Have we had any issues going to the poll? Perhaps. All right, not a problem. So as we can see, most of us have gone through some sort of training. We have gone through some sort of formal going to institutes, taking classes, learning from a teacher, learning in a classroom. And I don't know how much times we have actually thought about how we learned it. What strategies did we use back then when we were learning? What kind of metacognitive strategies we use to learn? And now that we're teachers, are we identifying these strategies on our students? Are we including them in our teaching? So part of our conversation today is just exactly that. sharing thoughts, sharing what we can do, and thinking about a good language learner. So think about that. We all, 60% of the people who answer, and I'm pretty sure that more did too, we went through a simulated environment in which we learned English. So we are learning, English learners. How did we learn it? For sure, we were good or we are good language learners. But what did we do that made us back then that make us back then a good language learner? What were those characteristics that made us good language learners? And are we thinking or are we observing these characteristics on our students? Are we promoting the strategies that we used on our students? Are we including these characteristics into our teaching, our day by day teaching? According to Rubin in 19, well, she's had many opportunities to update this, but according to one of the most known researchers in the field of language learning strategies, Rubin and Thompson in 1983 came with these 13 main characteristics of a good language learner. And I'm pretty sure that as you read them through, you're going to say, oh, yeah, I did this, I do this. And at the same time, think about who of your students apply or display these characteristics. Good learners who find their own way, good learners who organize information about language, creative and experimented with the language, their own opportunities to find studies. These points have been identified from people who have been recognized as good language learners. So, one more time, think about yourselves when you were learning and think about your students. Who are those students who display one, two, or more of these characteristics? And what this thinking, what this analysis is telling us is that we are changing, we are switching, we are going onto a different direction because for years we have thought, how do we teach? How can I make my teaching better? How can I improve my teaching in or outside the classroom? And now the message is let's shift that into how they learn, how our students are learning. What are those strategies that our students are learning? And better yet, those strategies can be can be taught. Can we train our students to be good language learners? Am I doing that? What are those language learning strategies that I can use in my classroom to improve learning on my students? Of course, I do not intend to cover years and decades of research about language strategies, but at least to give you a little bit of food for thought and start thinking, considering, and researching and identifying how we can use, implement, and include language learning strategies that make our students lifelong learners, that promote autonomy, that promote self learning, self sufficiency, and self agency when it comes to language learning. Now, according to experts, and there are many definitions on what language learner studies are. These are specific practices or techniques that can be employed autonomously to improve one's L2 learning and or use. Now let's concentrate on two words, techniques and autonomously. These are the fundaments of a strategy. Why? Because I know when to use them. I'm aware of when to use them, and I can use them on my own. So if everything is being autonomous, what is our role? Where? Nothing else that we need to train them. We need to teach them. We need to show them what those strategies are. Okay. I have another little quick poll that we can share, but I'm going to just skip it because maybe we not all of us have access to the website. So I'm just going to skip it and let's go straight into talking about. Let me just quickly here the strategies. The first consideration that we need to have is that there are two big categories of strategies when it comes to language learning. One category is direct strategies and one that is indirect. Now, for this session, for this conversation, we're going to concentrate on direct strategies only because they're the ones that we can most easily take on and implement on our teams. These strategies are defined as those that have directly involvement into the learning of a target language. And they are classified into three: memory strategies, those ones that directly involve memory, cognitive, and compensation strategies. So let's take a look at what they are, and let's take a look at what they can offer, and what they can bring to our classes. So first one is memory strategies, and this is important. It is memory, but it's not memorization because we need to have a clear difference between one and the other. When we talk about memory versus strategies versus memorization, we're talking about the level of retention that each route, each path takes. Because depending on the training and the practice fostered to them or adapted by them, the application is different. A strategy training on memory assists the learners into acquiring a high level of storage and retrieval of new information and vocabulary. How many times we have heard that our students are saying, I know what to say, I know what I want to say, but I just can't remember the words. I can't remember how you say this in English. So of course, we're not talking about rote memory, but we're talking about how this student could have retrieved this information if this student had been trained on how to do it, how to get that info that is back of the brains and bring it into a conversation, into the actual application. Let's consider that the mind can store almost 100 trillion of bits of information, and most of it can be utilized potentially with the aid of memory strategies. So, of all that information that we have been storing, we can get it, we can bring them, and we can use them if we have a good training on how to do it. We have this expert, his name is Thomas de Quincy, and he's right when he's stating that the memory of an individual develops as he or she lays the more burden on it. So the more information is there and it builds up on it. Imagine the quantity of information that we have gathered in of our year's life. Can we access to all of that? Perhaps not at first. But if we develop our memory through strategies, pretty sure they're going to be more efficient to do, in doing that. And of course, in language learning, we know that memorizing it, being able to retrieve this information is of substantial paramount and is a key component when it comes to using the language. Memorization and application of memory strategies are different. Memorization can be considered as a lower order thinking skill or learning skill. Let's think about Bloom's taxonomy, for example, which we will talk a little bit more tomorrow. Uh, but it's not of much help for our learners. We need them to go beyond that. This memorization is easily deleted, and there is not or little application of knowledge. And this is crucial, understanding that one thing is for our students to memorize, and another thing is for them to use memory strategies. Now, what are those memories? And there are many. These are not the only ones. These are just based on certain level of body of research, but we have many other uh, experts and many other thoughts schools. But these are the ones that have become the cradle for all this strategy. So the first strategy is creating mental linkages. The second one is applying images and sounds, reviewing well, and employing actions. Now, as you can see, we can start by these memory strategies are care, our mnemonics. And if we train our students, if we teach our students how to use these strategies effectively, pretty sure they're going to be able to retrieve more information that they can actually apply when it comes to using the language. So let's go one by one real quick. The first one, what is creating mental linkages? Well, it's just grouping, such as gathering the words into the same classification. When we talk about creating mental linkages, there are three set of strategies, sub strategies that are the cornerstone of the whole memory, the whole creating mental linkages. One is grouping, this one, and the model in which we do that is, for example, when we do a mind map or we do mental linkages. When we do this, we are organizing our brain, organizing our information, and we are creating links between words, concepts, words, images, and words and sounds. How many of us have used into a classroom a strategy like this one to learn vocabulary or to organize different grammar structures? Or maybe when you're teaching adverbs, how we can organize them so that we have emotions and we have adjectives around, not adverbs, adjectives, and we can start asking our students to create these linkages, and they can make how they can see how they correlate to each other. So this is a strategy that actually helps our brain. When we talk about grouping, we talk about classifying or reclassifying material into meaningful units, either mentally or in writing, to make the material easier to grasp, easier to remember. How? By reducing the number of discrete elements. And this is important. We're taking a whole bunch of numbers of items and we're putting them together into smaller pieces for us to be easier to remember. Yeah, it can be based on parts of the speech, or for example, when we talk about words, or we're talking about topics about weather, for instance, or we're talking about a practical function, what we use, what words we use, etc. The power of the strategy may be enhanced by labeling the groups using acronyms or using different colors to represent different groups. So we are still in the first one, creating mental linkages, and we have a set of three more sub strategies. First is grouping. The second one is associating, and this is relating new language information to concepts already in memory or relating one piece to a previous piece that we have in our brain. When we do that, it activates schemata and we are making associations. For example, we talk about fly, talking about plane, talking about around the world. But fly is also this little insect. Oh, an insect is also an ant. Oh, fly is also a bird. And I relate bird with a tree. And that, you see, so when we ask our students to do this with vocabulary, for example, what they're doing is linking new info to info that they already have. And this helps them to retrieve information in an easier way. And the third sub strategy into creating mental linkages is placing new words into context. That is in a sentence, in a conversation, or in a story. So we can take these three and put them together. And we tell our students to first, let's talk about emotions and let's talk about transportations. And we do our mind maps with images and sounds. Then we do the association of these concepts to new concepts. and then we ask them to put them all together. For example, here we are using plain that we already saw in the first strategy, and frightened. So students are starting to use and to incorporate all the information into new meaningful communication. What is our role here? Well, our role is to show them, our students, show them how to use them. When we're teaching vocabulary, we ask them to do this creating mental linkages. We ask them to do the mind map. We ask them to do the association, and we ask them to produce new words, new sentences, new tests with this information. Okay? So we covered the first C out of care, creating mental links. Now, second one is applying images and sound. Is very similar, and this works beautifully when we're talking about young learners, but also with older learners as well. And into this applying images and sound, we have four sub strategies, which are using imagery, the first one that we're seeing here, using keywords, semantic mapping, and representing sounds in memory. These all involve remembering by means of visual images or sounds. And when we add YouTube, when we add apps in which students can record themselves, we're going to show you, like, for example, Mindomo, which is a free collaborative mind mapping. We can use all of these tools in order to make it more interactive. Using imagery in this case, when students are using it, they are trying to remember their native language vocabulary to remember their target language. And of course, I can see maybe some faces where I can't see the faces, but I imagine that we are thinking, oh, hold on, are we talking about using L1? Yes. Why not? We need to think how to make our lives easier. And again, let's go back to that 60% of us who learned English in a non-speaking in not an English speaking country, not native country, but we went through formal training. How many times did we not use our native language to make associations? We use them. Has been maybe somehow demonized because it's forbidden, because they want to expose our students to as many times to a target language as possible, which is fine. But remember, we are talking about here how to make learning much more efficient, easier for our students. And this is one. Now, relating new information to concepts in memory by means of meaningful visual imagery, either in the mind or in an actual drawing, this strategy can be used to remember abstract words, can be used to learn cognates, can be used to learn new specific action words, something that is more concrete or is more abstract. So using imagery, for example, here we can see how introduce is introducir in Spanish, but also we know that it's got other meanings. Roar, as we have with the lion, this makes this image powerful memorization for our students. And remember that we're talking about the memory strategies. Semantic mapping is the sub strategy number two, part of applying images and sound. Again, let's go back to our mind map, to our first association of words, but now we add images. So we are talking about our students using more than one sense, more than one learning style, if you wish, to start making associations. I wanted to talk to you about Mindomo. Mindomo.com. It's a mind mapping software that can be accessed online. It used to have pricing. Well, it used to have three free mind maps, but the beauty of it is that you can create a collaborative mind map. So you can open one at your students, or you can create a whole network of new vocabulary that all students can have access to. and they can all pitch in with a little bit of words, an image, or a sound. So in this way, we are integrating technology in a collaborative environment, but using language learning strategies. That is semantic mapping. And a semantic mapping, we use keywords, and students use words to remember those keywords, the topic that we are talking about, making an arrangement in such way that the words and the concept have meaning and they are related to each other. This strategy involves meaningful imagery, grouping, associations, and it visually shows how certain groups or words relate to each other. And this is powerful to cover as many students' learning styles as possible. Then we have, as part of applying images and sound, keywords. Yes? And of course, we talk about keywords is just how to get these words into remembering these words for our students by using auditory and visual links. And of course, the keywords are the ones that take us into a larger base of knowledge, a larger database of vocabulary we can bring about. And reviewing well, which is the R from the care. Basically, reviewing well is a structural reviewing. And again, repetition is important in language learning, but not necessarily the kind of repetition that is provided over and over again. No, when we talk about reviewing well, we're talking about that just more than just going over the same vocabulary over and over again. It is not enough. Research has research has stated that many studies have suggested that the number of repetitions needed to learn a word is between 10 to 15 times. It means that if if our students are exposed to a word between 10 and 15 times in different contexts, this word will stick to them, right? And of course, there are variations, depends on the type of word, the frequency, etc. But full readers may require between 12 and 25. So if we have these numbers as our base for learning a word, and how are we making this into our classrooms? How are we making this into our processes and to our teaching processes? Are we making conscious efforts in which we take a word or a concept and expose our students at least between 10 and 50 times in different contexts? So that is the type of reviewing that is really meaningful for our students. Not repeating rote memory over and over, but different contexts in different situations so they can see them and they can remember it. Now, if they're reviewing well, then we jump into employing action, our last of CARE, our acronym, which is basically employing physical response or sensations. I'm sorry for the typo there, and using mechanical techniques. Mechanical techniques meaning that they have to respond physically to an input, right? So we have these when we talk about total physical response. That's number one. And mechanical is when they have to change physically something. For example, they are asked to move something, or they're asked to create something, or to build something. So when we put together all these strategies, all these care strategies, we're going into actually and efficiently using memory strategies, not memorization. Care, creating mental links, applying images and sounds, reviewing well, and employing actions. We combine them all together into our lesson plans in a thoughtful manner, in a systematic, organized, and methodic way. We are going to be teaching our learners how to use these strategies to remember more and hence to improve their language. So remember that we're talking about direct strategies. The first one is memory strategies. The second one, the big category, is the cognitive strategies. And cognitive strategies are essential in learning a new language. Such strategies are varied a lot. There are many different ones, ranging from repeating to analyzing expressions to summarizing, and with all the variety, cognitive strategies are unified by a common function: manipulation or transformation of the target language by the learner. Now, into cognitive strategies, we have four sets of sub strategies. These are practicing, receiving and sending messages, analyzing and reasoning, creating structure for input and output. So these are the sub strategies that are part of the cognitive ones. Good. So let's just briefly talk about them. Now, when we are, I'm just going to try to summarize here because there are many. And when we talk about cognitive strategies, I said there are four sets of strategies. So when we mention analyzing and reasoning, we are talking about getting the idea quickly. For example, when we teach our students how to scan or skim a document for specific information. Using resources for receiving and sending messages means that we are teaching our students how to look for ways to not only understand, but also send out information in written or spoken way. How to use elicitation, how to use circumlocutions, how to use paraphrasing. So these strategies, when we teach our students to use them in a more, uh, let's say, being aware of what the strategies are and how they can use, it helps them to improve their language learning. Creating structure for input and output, we are talking about reasoning deductively. We teach grammar in inductive or deductive way, analyzing expressions, analyzing contrastively, and this also taps into contrasting our L1 versus L2. So it means that it's not that it's forbidden, it's just that there are some connections that can be related to each other and they can help our students to anchor new information and hence learning new language. Translating and transferring. And there are two different things here. When we talk about translation, we are talking about moving from one to the other language. But transferring is extrapolating skills from our L1 to an L2. In practicing, we have repeating, formally practicing with sounds and writing systems, understanding the grammar, the morphosyntactic aspects of the language, recognizing and using formulas and patterns, what goes first, subject verb agreement, that kind of deductive teaching has to be present there. Recombining to create new text and practicing in a natural environment. And receiving and sending messages is us teaching our students to how to take notes, how to summarize, and how to highlight. So by teaching this, we are giving our students the tools to have a more complete and round understanding of the strategies they can use that are part of the metacognitive part or the metacognition. And I want to go back quickly into the translating and transferring because I know that for many of us, we have been raised in a learning environment in which L1 is forbidden and we cannot, and it has changed a lot. It has changed a lot. And one of the topics and one of the concepts that has come across and very strongly is translanguaging. And just that, let's remember that learning through the medium of a second or additional language is becoming very common in different parts of the world because of the increased use of English as the language of instruction, business interaction, and because of the mobility of population. So now we have that many people from different backgrounds are learning more and more English. And these changes have resulted in a situation that demands specific approaches, considering multilingualism that demands a different mindset, a different approach, a different teaching structure. And pedagogical translanguaging, for example, is a theoretical and instructional approach that aims at improving not only the strategies, as it is one of them, but also the language and content competencies. Because you know that now we are not only focusing on languages, but also in the competencies more than what we can do with the language. Not only learning grammar, not only learning the vocabulary, but how we can interconnect all this information into meaningful interactions, into meaningful exchanges. Another concept, of course, is code switching, in which refers to the alternation between languages. Now, when we use a little bit of Spanish and English, and most of us were told not to do that. But let's think about that how many times it got us out of problem. It got us out of trouble. If we were not able to understand or we were not able to make ourselves understood, we use code switching. We use a little bit of Spanish, a little of English, of course, with very logical and sensible ways for each. But my message here is that translanguaging is not a scene, is a situation, a phenomenon that is present, that is here, and is not going anywhere. Is not going anywhere. And we can take this into the classroom as well as a strategy. For example, when we talk about having our students build bilingual and multilingual glossaries, it's translanguaging, but it's a strategy. Drafting written work in first language. So they have to make, they have to build a test in second language, but they can draft it in their own language. So this is one activity that is a strategy, and people do learn through this. But we need to have the willingness to apply. Online research also, group discussions. Sorry for the Spanish here. Note taking, for example, noting down information while someone is talking or while watching a video in any languages. So if we're doing a speaking activity and I want my students to report on the video after they watch them, they can do it in Spanish, they can take the notes in Spanish, and they can report it in English. So that is valid. That is a strategy as well. And any collaborative group or peer activity with peers who share a language. And the discussions can be in the language of choice. And the reporting is in the second language. So these are typical strategies that we need to start considering and researching and seeing how they can be successfully being implemented in our classrooms. So we have seen one set of strategies, the memorization, memory strategies, and second one was cognitive strategies. And the third one is compensation strategies. And in compensation strategies, these strategies enable our learners to use new language for either comprehension or production, opposite to or despite limitations in knowledge. So I want to use the language. I feel maybe stuck. I cannot say a word. So what can I do to convey the message? What can I do to get my message across and not just stay there mute? So we need to teach our learners what type of compensation strategy they can use in order to get the message across, to convey the message. And they are basically divided into two set of strategies: guessing intelligently in listening and reading, and overcoming limitations in speaking and writing. And let's go back to the way we learn. How many times, and even now, when we're talking with somebody in Spanish or in English, there are pieces or bits in which I don't fully get, but I just had to make intelligent guesses because of the context I can get it, or because of certain keywords. That can be also extrapolated into English. So why don't we teach our students to do that as well? Despite of limitations, they can get the message. And also when it comes to overcoming limitations in the speaking and writing, what can I do to do that? So, what are some compensation strategies? For example, using linguistic clues, word parts, when we explain our students, they use the prefixes and suffixes so they can see that if a word is unknown to them, but they understand what a prefix is and what it means, so I can get a better understanding of the word. Using definitions or explanations, that is also very useful. So instead of translating, if we don't want them to translate just yet, so they can just work on the terms in terms of definitions, synonyms, or antonym contrast, and analogies. And as a tool, we can use an schema, a format, a diagram, just like this one, in which we give them our students new word and they start filling it out. So this is a practical application of how to use linguistic clues. What is the context? Where do I see this word? What is the definition? Not the translation. What is a symbol? What is a picture that represents that word? In which examples? In which examples we can see this wording? So we have different strategies that we need to start including, implementing in our classrooms. And when it comes to overcoming limitations in speaking and writing, code switching, that's one. If I don't get a word, I don't know how to say it, let's switch it. And our job as teachers is to scaffold that process so that for the next time, the next opportunity they need to use that word in interaction, they know what the word is. And we apply all the other strategies. Use mind or gesture, coining words, and using circumlocution or a synonym. So let's teach our students how to do this. Let's teach them. And you see how little by little they will be expanding their vocabulary and they'll be expanding their range of competencies in second language. Now, let's just briefly summarize. Direct language learning strategies are divided into three big categories, which are memory strategies, cognitive strategies, and compensation strategies. Memory, we have here. Cognitive, we have prac. And compensation, we have go. So these are some of the many, many, many strategies that we can start using. But our message here is that let's remember that our job is to teach them how to use them, is to train them, is to bring this into our teaching per se. So there are different models. I'm just going to leave here some of the models. Persons and Those model, Oxford's model, Chamot and O'Malley's model, Grenfell and Harris model are the ones that are being more widely used around the world. Personally, I go always for CALA. Why? Because it includes cognitive academic language learning. So it's not only EFL, it's not only ESL, but we're taking our students one step further when it comes to using more higher order thinking skills into a learning. I highly recommend this book, the Kala Handbook, which gives us all the basis to implement it should we do it. And what are the main components of this model? First, there is a preparation in which the teacher identifies students' current learning strategies, what they're using, and they can. Then we have a presentation of the strategies. Then they practice the strategies. Then there is self-evaluation, and this is where metacognition comes into play. There are expansion activities, and then there is assessment. It can be all found in this book. I highly recommend it. Kala has been around for many years, but it doesn't mean that has lost their their application into this teaching world. And also is Rebecca Oxford, and her model is very complete as well. It's good in terms that is very complete when it comes to using as many strategies as possible. But on the other hand, it has been proven that it's a little bit hard to take it into a classroom. It does not mean that we cannot adapt it, but these are the main steps, the main components in where wants to apply or implement Oxford model. Now, as a final word for you, I want to leave you with this quote. And it takes better teachers to focus on the learners. So, for my message here today is yes, it is important for us to improve how we teach, our teaching skills, but it's also important to think about how our students learn, and what can we do to make that learning more efficient so that our students can not only learn for the time they are in our classrooms, but also they can take that knowledge, those strategies into a route, into a path, a live learning, a lifelong learning path that makes them autonomous learning and they can keep learning even when they are out of our teaching environments. Okay, so this is on my side. Again, thank you so much for your attention, for inviting me to the conference. Thanks to UNED to having me here today. And I know that we have some certain time restriction right now in terms of that we have another presenter, but I'm happy to take any question, or please feel free to let my email. I think this is in my bio. Please feel free to write me any question you have regarding the strategies. I can just point you into very interesting resources. Or if you got a little bit interested on the Oxford test of English and you want to learn more about it, please also, I'm here to help. So thank you so much. And from Colombia, big hug, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you, and have a great rest of the conference. Goodbye.